There are many dystopian stories and movies and books about the idea of AI becoming sentient and the point where humanity has a hard time figuring out if someone they're talking to is actually an AI or is an actual human being. Is the thing I'm talking to someone who I can converse with or someone who I need to be worried about wanting to take over the world in some way? Recent AI developments have made it to the point where, honestly, we're starting to feel that point of feasibility of, maybe there's some truth to these fears that we need to actually pay attention to what's going on. And for sure, I think that's a topic of conversation. That's not what we're talking about in our podcast today, though. Today, we did a little bit of exploring on, okay, things are becoming more conversive. You can have more conversations. What does that mean for the day-to-day of someone who's in a solutions role? That is a topic of conversation on today's episode of the Presales Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am Jack Cochran, General Manager of Presales Collective, and was joined in this episode by Yasmeen Hyder, who I have gotten to know over a couple of conversations based out of Atlanta. We've done some events there. Yaz is an enterprise solutions consulting leader and has shared with me something that I wanted to bring to all of you, which is that she uses her AI voice companions not just for things like research, but for having a brainstorming and discussion, something she's built into her daily workflow of actually sitting down and talking with AI, not just typing with it. And she talks all about why it's important to actually start thinking about speaking when engaging with AI and what you might be missing by not doing that. So that's what we're talking about in today's episode. I'm really excited for you to kind of jump in and hear this conversation and then continue the conversation with us in our Slack, in our podcast channel there. Make sure you're checking that out at presalescollective.com today. If you've not joined our Slack, you've not joined the community, everyone is welcome. It is free to join. You can continue what you're hearing on the podcast there. So without further ado, I want to hop right into this episode where we're talking with Yaz right after the break. Salio is a leading demo experience platform trusted by some of the largest software brands. Through a single unified AI-powered platform, companies can run high-stakes live demos in their native product, creating self-service tours and delivering conversational autonomous demos 24/7. Salio empowers pre-sales, sales, and marketing teams to close deals faster by reducing demo prep time, shortening sales cycles, and enhancing demo satisfaction. Check them out today at salio.io. Well, Yaz, welcome to the Presales Podcast. So excited to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jack, for having me. I'm really excited for this opportunity.
We've been talking for a while, so I'm excited to have you on. The topic that we're going to talk about today, ever since we first talked about it, I've been thinking about it, and I remember actually kind of dabbling a little bit into it, but I don't know if I'm doing it right. So I'm excited to hear from you, from someone who's clearly a pro on this AI thing. But first, before we get there, for people who don't know you, I guess talk to me a little bit about your career journey. What got you to where you are now?
So honestly, it's been a mix of curiosity and some bold pivots. Candidly, I started out my career in the healthcare space, had high ambitions of becoming a doctor once upon a time. And I was actually working in a lab environment for a while, as well as a medical group. And that experience gave me a really strong foundation in terms of solving complex problems, thinking analytically, and being on your feet. But the work itself was really solitary in nature. And I realized pretty quickly that while I love the problem-solving aspect, I missed that human element. And so at the same time, pharma sales kind of felt like the natural next step. It's still in healthcare, but it's people first. And that path and really exploring that landed me into tech sales, and I found my home in pre-sales. Fast forward, it's been 13, 14 years, and I'm still in the SC space. And I genuinely wake up every single day excited because no 2 days are the same.
That's very true.
Right? And pre-sales is such a fun space. It sits at the intersection of business strategy, of technology, we're storytelling, and it's a little bit of psychology too. And now with AI layered into that, it feels like the role has evolved and it's expanding all over again. And we're not just solutioning for our customers anymore. We're rethinking how we work. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how can we do better? How can we be more impactful? How can we be more efficient per se? And also use perhaps less mental capacity.
I'm trying to think about the conversations that I would have around the pre-sales profession 5 years ago. And it was all, at least at that point, very focused on some of the very tactical how are we doing POCs? How do we avoid POCs? How are we delivering demonstrations? How are we telling a customer story? It was very like tactical pieces versus now it's at what point are we getting involved? Are we including post-sale type of conversations? How do we basically make it so that we're not focusing so much on demonstrations, but more on value? Like we've up-leveled a little bit over the past year, and I'm seeing that, you're right, with AI happening even more, right? How can we do our job better with AI?
That's very well said. And, we're definitely seeing that shift from being more tactical to much more strategic. And I think the buying process and our buyers have also evolved to expect that from us.
Well, let's get right into the topic. I feel like we've teased people enough on this. The topic being using your voice and talking to AI. So, do you mean literally talking to AI? What do you mean by that?
Yes, I literally mean talking. And if there's one thing I want folks to walk away, for those of you that are listening, it would be that being able to think out loud is incredibly powerful. And you can do that instead of doing that solo. You can do that solo leveraging AI capabilities.
So you literally have a setup then that sounds like where you're using your voice instead of typing. I think most of us engage with different LLMs, AI agents, or whatever else using some type of a keyboard or our phones typing versus talking.
Exactly. And, we talk a lot about prompting, and that doesn't go away, especially while you're on meetings and you're trying to get some thoughts or responses right then and there. But I think voice lets you brain dump in a way that typing never will. Whether it's voice notes or live back and forth conversation, it turns what would have been much more of a solitary session into this sort of collaborative working session with AI as your partner.
Got it. So give me an example of that. It's like something that you do on a fairly regular basis. Like what point you're like, hey, now it's time to talk to AI?
So back and forth on Zoom calls, as is the nature of many of our worlds day to day. And I joke that I'll literally stand at my desk. Sometimes I even close my eyes and just talk for a few minutes, whether I'm recording a voice note or it's back and forth. There isn't much structure to it. It's just raw thoughts. And as long as you're including the basics, right? What role are you playing? What is the task or goal at hand? Essentially, by speaking, you're providing incrementally greater context than you would have if you were typing it out.
Okay, so by role you're playing, what does that mean?
An example could be I'm a pre-sales leader that is having a conversation with XYZ title, persona, this company, what they care about. And so I'm still defining that, but I'm saying it verbally.
Gotcha. So it's giving the context for the response coming back. That makes sense. I knew this was coming up. So I'm like, I need to try this out before I actually talk to you about this on the show. And I had mixed results. Sometimes I was struggling with, I wasn't sure if it was actually listening to me. I felt like I was more engaged with the technology than I was with the actual output that it was giving me. How do you set this up in a way that you can just close your eyes and go and not have to worry about that?
It does require a little bit of behavioral change. Normally, we're used to talking to people. And so talking to yourself or to your computer can seem a little bit bizarre at first. But when you're typing, you're spending energy really formulating what you want to say. You're focused on the perfect prompt. And that mattered more, I would say, a year or two ago. But models have really evolved. And so once you get into this flow of talking to AI, almost like you would talk to a human in certain capacities, it becomes a lot easier. And it's a lot less about precision and more about just being able to articulate all of the thoughts that you have and saying it out loud. Once you get into that rhythm, you start to do it a couple of times, you start to be a bit more verbose intentionally, the output drastically will improve.
That makes sense. I feel like 2025 LinkedIn was nonstop how to prompt better. There were so many rules that if you put them into practice, you would actually see better results. But you're right. I'm seeing that less and less now. And even in my typing experience, sometimes I'll throw something, I'm like, well, that's a terrible prompt. It's not going to know what I mean, but it picks it up. So I think you're right. It is getting better. And maybe I'm still stuck in worrying about how do I give a perfect prompt with my voice if I haven't written it out first.
That's very well said. And candidly, that's the direction we all need to go. Again, prompting will never go away, and having really well-defined structured prompts are extremely important when you want an output that is very specific. But when you're using AI as more of a thought companion and you're stress testing decisions or thinking through ideas that are a bit more fluid, the need for the perfect output goes away. And it's more of how do you use it as an extension of your brain? And so without that necessity for perfection, you kind of take that mental load away and say, I'm just going to say all the thoughts that are in my head out loud, without necessarily focusing on how accurate, how perfect, how well of a prompt it is, and more of, am I just relieving that mental load? And have I said everything I want to say? And it's meant to be verbose. It's meant to be extra in nature.
It's almost that things that you would otherwise have stuck in your brain that you're at least getting it out, you're at least saying it on one hand, maybe getting some feedback, maybe not, but at least you're no longer having to hold that in your brain.
Exactly. And as human beings, we evolved to speak and listen first, right? Writing came later, typing came far later. And when you are typing, it's a much lower bandwidth motion in the sense that your brain starts to slow down. You're thinking about the spelling, you're thinking about the grammar and the structure. And speaking on the flip side is high bandwidth and far lower inhibition. You're capturing these raw thought clusters that otherwise would get lost to the speed of your fingers.
I definitely feel that I've done voice to text for writing long documents. They're often scripts that I'm doing for videos where I'll start using my voice and then I'll edit it from there. Sometimes when I start going, I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what ideas are going to come out. And by the time I'm done, I've got 9 different ideas and I have a problem trying to edit it down. Just because I wasn't sitting there trying to type, it flowed more freely. So I've definitely felt it from that perspective, what you're talking about. Your brain definitely has to process more to get it into written form than if you just speak it.
I couldn't agree more. And, taking it to the next level, if you take some of those scripts and instead of just doing the voice to text, you can do the voice to text in your LLM of choice, right? Drop of that voice note into Gemini or ChatGPT, and it can help you really take things to the next level.
I may have to give that a go. Maybe for the next video, like throw the script in there or speak the script in there, right? I'll give that a go and see what suggestions come back. For sure. That's something I've not thought about before.
And it's exactly why when you think about it, like, where do our best ideas come up? It's not often when we're sitting in front of a screen and have this sort of blank document. It's often when you're on a walk or drive or in nature where there is that sort of creative energy flowing.
There is something to be said about speaking your thoughts out loud that gets into that same mental frame of mind as when you're processing information. And I've talked about this actually on different podcasts, both this show as well as other shows that I've done, about that you need to have an equal amount of time that you spend offloading the inputs. And then we're so input focused in our culture between our work coming at us all the time and then our phones with social media that we never have any time for restricting the input. And speaking, when you're speaking, especially if you're speaking to something that you're on a walk or you're in the shower and you're using that time to process or say things out loud, you get in that same mental space. And so while I'm thinking this through, it seems like you're unlocking that same brain processing time by speaking to an LLM, by speaking and thinking your thoughts out loud that way, compared to trying to type it out, which is not going to get your headspace in the same processing unlock mode.
Yeah, and you're getting in that processing unlock mode. I love how you frame that in a much faster way, because now you don't necessarily need to be in that physical space or state. You can just harness the power of voice to text or back and forth voice capabilities to get your brain into that state. We'll talk a little bit about tips and tricks and suggestions. Recently came across some research that Google did on how you can simply get a better response by repeating the same prompt twice. And while this was specifically focused on text, it could be the same word for word response. It improved the output accuracy across models, not just refining it, not making it better, just repeating the exact same thing. And the theory is that models process language sequentially. So the first pass builds context, and the second pass would really stabilize the interpretation. So it's almost like giving AI an opportunity to reread before answering. As we kind of translate that over to voice does something very similar, except instead of repeating the same exact words, you're naturally restating and reframing those ideas out loud. So you get the same benefit, but in a much more human way.
I was going to say, but humans tend to process the same way. You give someone the chance to answer twice, they're going to probably get more accurate that second time. So that will make it feel more human. It's probably not an intended output, but I think a reason why this works so well, if I'm understanding you correctly, is because it feels like real feedback from another human, even though it's a model giving you the answer back. This would lend to that even more as well. I had to restate it and then I got a better answer.
It's like being able to whiteboard or have a conversation with your peers without them actually being there. And so our ability to be creative in a solo capacity, to think, to make decisions, we do it day in, day out in leadership roles and in our personal lives. It makes it that much easier to expand our capacity.
It reminds me a little bit of sort of the engineer's rubber ducky. I don't know if you're familiar with this, if you've ever spent any time talking to software engineers, but they have something that they talk about, which is using a rubber ducky to help troubleshoot problems that they run into when they get stuck with something they're trying to develop. You speak it out, you talk it out loud, you explain the problem to the duck, and then you figure out the problem because you just took the time to speak it. You took the time to voice it out loud. Our brains normally can figure it out. And so you're doing a lot of that same thing where you're talking out your problems, and by the time you get the answer back from the LLM, you might have already figured it out.
Exactly. And so this is a rubber ducky on steroids.
Yes, exactly. One thing I had noticed, or remember you saying when we were talking before, preparing for this episode, is around stress testing internal decisions with AI. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used, voice AI to walk through a tough leadership or strategy decision?
Definitely. And as human beings, we have recency bias. So I'm going to share a very recent example. Using it to stress test decisions is honestly one of the most powerful use cases. Leadership decisions are rarely binary in nature, right? They're layered. There's the dynamics of the issue at hand or the decision. There's the timing, there's the risk, the people, and there's also the downstream implications. And so voice AI can be used as a thought companion. Now, whether you're doing voice to text or actually talking back and forth, I think both modalities are immensely powerful. But essentially, I'll say something like, okay, right now I'm preparing for business reviews, and beyond what is expected of us, I want to come up with 2 or 3 things that I think we want to focus on or do differently this year. And ideas are a dime a dozen. It's all about execution. And so I'm stress testing these ideas and saying, let me just brain dump these ideas. You'll hear me say the word brain dump time and time again. And I think it's hilarious, but it's so, so important. I'm taking everything in my mind and translating that and vocalizing it and sharing, here is the idea, here are the decisions that I could potentially make. So walk me through decision A, decision B, decision C, but also walk me through ideas or decisions that I haven't thought through and pressure test each of these. And instead of asking for an answer, I'll often say, walk me through questions that'll help me come to a conclusion or a decision. I think the real advantage there, a lot of folks will use AI to stress test decisions in such a preliminary capacity. Give me an answer. And that's not the way that you want to go. Sure, it can give you answers, but there's so much nuance and there's so much complexity that by prompting it to ask you more of those questions and having that sort of dialogue, this discussion could be a few minutes to far longer, you're able to go a lot deeper. And so one of the questions that I was asking myself recently, again, as I prepare for this business review, was what is that boundary of where I want individuals, myself included, to go deeper in terms of product knowledge and domain expertise? And where do we want to focus on building specialization? And the barometer that I really landed on, and it's quite simple, is high complexity and low volume. You really want to build specialization versus where you're seeing high volume and that repeatability. It makes sense to go deeper and really build that depth. And of course, getting there, there's so much nuance, right? What are the expectations of customers, expectations of the market? What are the skill sets that we have today? How much time and resource allocation are we going to need to be able to get to that? And that voice lets me unpack those layers far more quickly, just like that whiteboarding example. So pre-LLM days, how would I have approached this? I would have taken pen to paper. I would have whiteboarded. I actually still have a very large whiteboard in my office. And I would actually go through all of those ideas. And that thought process, sometimes I might spend an hour, hour and a half on. And now that level of thought can be compressed via a voice note or that back and forth voice coach in terms of maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So something takes me 3, 4, 5x less time to get to the same level of mental clarity because I'm not actually needing to put pen to paper. Writing doesn't go away. It still imprints in your brain and it's still a very useful capability, but sometimes I'm taking notes, pen to paper while I'm talking at the same time, highlighting keywords. What we're really seeing is this evolution of how we work.
There was something you had mentioned while you were talking about referring to it as a coach. And that was the image I was getting in my mind as well. Because what a good coach, not a sports coach, but like a team coach, like in a business context. What a good coach does is ask you questions to help guide you to the answer that you're looking for, right? And I think oftentimes we have been traditionally used to using LLMs to give us the answers, to give us, I have this question, right? Just a glorified Google search. But what I hear you saying and what I'm kind of taking away from this is something I want to try more is get the LLM to ask you the questions back, right? And so you're posing something, but come back at me with questions, coach me, guide me, and help me find the answer versus you giving me the answer. That's a unique take. And that's something that if you wanted to have someone do that, you either have to take someone's time or pay a lot of money to get someone to coach you in that way. Why not use this to do that?
Right. And everyone that I've spoken to in my network, whether it's at work or externally, there's this desire for greater coaching and mentorship and being able to bounce ideas off of our peers. And that doesn't go away, but time is so precious and it's so limited. And just as you said, we either have to harness someone's time or pay for it. And so this radically diminishes the cost or the level of resource needed to get some of that same output. And instead of saying I need someone for an hour to walk through a decision, I can use my LLM of choice and get to that decision or get to the top 2 or 3 directions that I want to go and do 80% of that thinking before I approach that person or before I take someone's time. And so I think it's mutually beneficial in that regard.
I definitely agree. I'm trying to think through here. Okay, this is sounding great to me, but let's play a little bit of the skeptic because there will be some people listening who is saying, that sounds great, but I'm on back-to-back Zoom calls all day. I'm talking for my job. I don't want to do more talking because that is exhausting when you are talking to present, right? As we all know, if you've got a 2-hour demo or a 2-hour presentation, it's a lot and you are exhausted by the end of it. I don't want to come out of one of those meetings and now talk to AI more. So what would you say to that from your perspective? You have mentioned before that it is a little bit different. So how are you still getting that Zoom break while doing this process?
That's a very valid call out. And I'm sure folks would agree with you and say, why do I want to talk more? I'm talking all day long. And it's very different when you're presenting or speaking to someone else. There's a level of rehearsing. There's a specific goal in mind. It's time bound. And there's a level of expectation as well as restraints in place. And in this sort of regard, I actually think that talking to AI is a great way to reset. And you can actually use it as a lever to reset from Zoom fatigue. And you're probably wondering, wow, why, how? Tell me a little bit more
exactly
about this.
Right.
Right. And if someone walked into my office, and thankfully no one's walking in, they may catch me standing at my desk, eyes closed, recording a voice note, for example. And thankfully, again, no one's walking in, but it's grounding, it's calming, it's a reset because none of those expectations exist. It's not like I'm delivering for a specific purpose or with intent. Whether I get to a response in a couple of back and forth interactions or I sleep on it and I have that extension of everything I thought of today recorded in a chat, that gives me that fluidity. And a lot of times we're on camera, right? We're focusing on visually centering on that green dot. That visual reset, closing your eyes, maybe you're standing up. I think there's opportunities to marry those grounding behaviors while also just being able to brain dump. You're not staring at a screen. You're not performing on camera. You're just thinking. And so it does become this sort of auditory and mental reset. And there's something so powerful about externalizing those thoughts instead of mentally carrying them all day. You're giving context to AI, but you're also clearing that cognitive load for yourself. It's productive and it's restorative. And if you don't believe me, give it a try. But what I would ask is, how do you feel when you've taken the weight of your own thoughts off of your shoulders?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, I guess, when you would go vent to someone because you had a bad day. You're not thinking of that venting time as, oh, more presenting. No, you're presenting your day, but it's not stressful. What I'm hearing you say is that it's more along the lines of that, of the release you need of all the thoughts, as opposed to yet another thing you're performing for.
That is so well said. And it extends well beyond work too. I think as we're adopting AI into our day-to-day, it's more about having that AI native mindset. And so I use it a lot in my personal life as well, whether it's life decisions, personal trade-offs, even investment decisions at times. And it becomes your thought companion. And one of my favorite things to do is take walks after work, whether it's for a few minutes or a longer stroll through nature. And I'll often reflect almost like a personal therapist in a way on how my day went. It's grounding, and it's where a lot of my ideas are actually born out of.
Yeah, I love that. I've always recommended to people find some non-screen time. I actually have taken to not taking my earbuds to the gym recently, just trying to let myself, well, then have to tune out the music at the gym as well, but trying as much as possible to tune that out just to allow myself to, again, not input, but to decompress out of that. And 100% agree.
And I'll add, so last night we were chatting about potentially hosting an event in March in Atlanta and, keeping this sort of quarterly cadence. We talked about budget. We talked about ideas. And I got into my Uber last night and I started talking to ChatGPT in the back seat of my Uber. My Uber driver probably thinks I'm a little bit insane, but I do have some fun ideas that we can chat about this evening.
I'm excited to see where that conversation went. One other thing I have to ask you about, because you were joking with me before when we were talking about this, that you talk to AI more than you talk to your husband. And my question about that is, what does he think of that? That he gets more of your time than he does?
I mean, my husband is still my favorite conversation partner.
Well, that's good. That's good.
But AI obviously gets much more airtime during the day. And the difference is AI has infinite patience, and I can rehash the same decision 5 times, explore 10 angles, and change my mind.
So he's probably in favor of this.
Very much so. And jokes aside, we actually find it fascinating. And beyond work, we're very active in the community, volunteering and giving back. And there's a lot of decision making involved in our lives, whether it's at work or beyond work. And so both of us actually talk to AI. And one of the things that we do together, especially when we're in the car, is we'll both talk to Grok about ideas, about things that we want to build. I recently took a lovable workshop and was sharing my experience, but instead of just speaking to him about my experience, we threw Grok into the mix. And now you have this sort of 3-way conversation going. And so the opportunities are really endless. And I did want to share, as we think about what we can do, we've talked a lot about how to use voice AI, what works. We haven't talked much about specific tips and tricks. I shared the example of repeating things. Another one that I think is so important, as folks walk out of this conversation, whether it's you're typing or you're actually communicating by voice, which I'm a huge advocate of. Talk about what you want, but talk about what you don't want. This idea of...
that's good. Yeah.
Right? This idea of negative prompting. And so when you don't have those guardrails in place, you're going to get a response that's fairly average. And when you start to put guardrails into this, as I'm preparing for the same business review, I'm thinking about, okay, what do I not want? What are the guardrails, the limitations that I want to put forth so that I get a better answer, a better output?
I think we've all probably been on the back end of I need a simple answer and gotten something complex back. I remember once asking, is there a simple way to code something. It was like something technical, and I didn't pay attention to the output. It built an app for me, and I'm like, that was yes, you're not wrong. It's all I want. I did not need the extra. And so I do feel like making sure we're putting the boundaries on what we don't want is very important, because honestly, who they remind me of is brand new SCs who, when they get asked a question, they want to show how much they know. And sometimes you have to put the guardrails to say, sometimes a yes is an okay answer.
And to probe further, yes, but why does this matter to you?
Right. Yeah, that would be great. Yes, we need to teach LLMs on how to be better SCs for sure. So we're almost out of time. So before we go, how can someone get a hold of you if they want to get in touch with you?
So I will drop my LinkedIn and my email if folks want to reach out. I'm very responsive and would welcome the dialogue. And if there's one thing I want folks to take away from this conversation, it's to use voice.
Yes, I love it. We'll leave it at that. That's a great takeaway. I've enjoyed the conversation. The time has flown by. I have so many more questions, but I might ask them to ChatGPT before I ask you. We'll see.
Right. And you can talk to it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. It's been such an amazing opportunity to chat, and excited to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Presales Podcast by Presales Collective. Did you know that we also post on the Presales Collective blog following each episode? Head there to read through information on shows you might have missed or find another past episode to listen to. For more information on the Presales Podcast itself and to listen to those past episodes, visit presalescollective.com/podcast.